Today, let's fix the biggest problem in No Rest for the Wicked. We'll look at the problem in the game, figure out what the situation is by discussing it in more detail, analyzing its design implications. We're going to identify what the ideal outcomes are for the system, and of course, go through some solutions to the problem to figure out what the best one is. Stick around, it's going to be fun. No Rest for the Wicked is a brilliant Souls-like meets action role-playing game, and it totally lives up to the hype, even in early access. I mean, just look at it.
It's too late for any of us.
The level design kind of deserves a video in and of itself. The crafting of these compelling visual moments, audio design, rewarding players for doing something and being inquisitive and exploring. The control scheme itself, making sprint a hard choice. The inventory and leveling up and having to pick which one you actually want to dig into. It's rife with RPG features, and most of them don't show up pretty early, but you get to discover them as you go. There's a rune system where you can move your special abilities around. You can socket gems into items to make them more powerful and upgrade them. There's even daily, weekly bounty system. One which super caught my eye was the building system. It surprised me so much. The combat itself is weighty, with loads of promise. The stamina-based combat is really compelling with lots of interesting choice there. However, it also has a pretty fundamental design problem which, if not fixed, could really hamper its success. It's a pretty challenging game, and players of course need a way to heal mid-combat. You don't want this to be something which can just be spammed over and over. You want a system that is somewhat restrictive, enough to not feel punishing of making attempts, but also something which can't be exploited such that it encourages poor edge case behavior, like just avoiding forever, waiting for a cooldown to come up. In a situation where there's too much healing in combat, you can end up with players simply avoiding the fight to wait for the next health charge to come up. This is also why cooldowns are generally poor uses here. It's fairly easy just to wait it out, especially if you have an infinite pool of healing. Healing should also be a tactical decision. Healing in these kind of games should generally present itself as an interesting choice, something which, if done correctly, can swing the tide of the battle in the player's favor. This is especially true with the long use time for healing. Players can't just press it and get healed at any time. They have to be very specific, very tactical on when they heal. In No Rest for the Wicked, replenishing of heals is tied to meals. On the surface, this seems fine and it makes a lot of contextual sense. Meals give your health back, so that's the primary way to replenish health. This also gives meals a fairly unique role in the system space. Imagine your game as a pie chart. All of your systems take up a certain amount of that pie chart. Some of these overlap, but the more they're able to be their own unique part of the pie, the better the system. Meals are created using crafting and are a limited resource. Again, this makes sense. Many other games do this, and it's not that big of a problem in those games. Meals also give you various amounts of health and some bonus stats, kind of like maybe increased stamina for a short period of time. I love this. It's really similar to, say, in Valheim or in Shrouded, where meals give you secondary benefits. This is great because it gives more choice behind what meal you're going to eat, customizing your character around that choice. It ensures that meals have their own unique place in the pie chart of systems. Damn it, now I want pie. The problem is, in order to heal in combat, players need to consume a crafted item. To craft that item, they need to farm for materials or spend gold, which they also need to farm for. The act of farming for these materials or gold also pushes players into combat. On top of this, death and combat generally incur a loss of durability, which also requires gold to repair. This can, in the worst case scenario, lead players to being in a situation where they can't even continue to play the game, as all their gear is broken and they can't readily farm for crafting materials. This is extreme, of course, but it is a possibility. In reality, what happens is players farm for a few meals, go into the fight with a hard enemy, use those meals and die. They then need to go and farm for more materials, craft, die, repeat. Combining scarcity, the healing method, and combat, which is intentionally punishing, results in a severe negative feedback loop. This situation, it's just too lossy. It doesn't help that as a side punishment for death is also durability, which then requires the player go and farm for more gold while still risking death. It's kind of a secondary problem, but they are related. The current situation that's in the early access is that eventually you have so much gold that the system becomes kind of moot, as you just purchase the supplies you need. It's not great design overall because it's not really a solution. It's kind of a band-aid. It means that the core system itself as the solution is just to allow players to completely ignore it. It's one thing to give the players an interesting choice to mitigate pain, but this isn't an interesting choice. It's kind of like the designer realized the system wasn't great, so just gave the players enough coin to avoid it altogether. This is something designers do, but really only in cases where it's a real emergency or, the designer doesn't have the time to fix the core system itself. The real challenge here is what happens if they fix the coin problem? Right now, there's a glut of coin in the economy, but what happens if they reduce that or resolve that problem? Then the issue with being able to just purchase the crafting materials to make a meal, well, that's no longer possible. So what do players do? Well, they have to go back to farming for the material that they need to get in order to make the meal. Before we get into what the solutions would be, what's an ideal outcome look like? 1, players can heal in combat and die without feeling like they're being punished with a chore or end up in this broken state. 2, healing in combat should be restricted. You shouldn't be able to infinitely heal. Eventually, you should run out of healing so that you die. 3, encourage experimentation and failure. It's okay if players feel like they want to, experiment and learn the moveset of the enemy again and again and again without being punished by it more than what they are. And 4, meals as a crafting system should retain an interesting role in the game. So, what are the solutions? First, I guess you could just do nothing. It's painful in the early game, but it does work itself out once you have enough coin. This isn't a great solution, of course. This is more of a band-aid. And like I said, if you do tune out the coin so that it's not as prevalent in the end game, well, it kind of breaks this. Secondly, you could actually create a new base level food item which doesn't have any bonuses attached to it, but it's just, it's enough healing to get through, and it could be like really easy or even free to get. This feels like a bit of a band-aid, I suppose, but it does very cleanly fit in with the rest of the systems the most. It would probably also be the easiest to add. You wouldn't have to then do a new UI or anything. It's just like one item that you can add. This would be similar to what mushrooms or something that's also very prevalent like apples sort of serve. You can consume those in a fight and they give you a tiny amount. You could just create a custom, very unique item, which isn't a crafting ingredient, that is a meal in and of itself, and it just gives you the healing, and it could be available on vendors for basically free. Another option is just replace meals entirely with a standard health flask, like an Estus flask from Dark Souls. The nice thing about this, it's a really proven solution. You would have limited uses in combat. There's no need to refill or do any kind of collection or crafting in order to refill between fights. This would give players the ability, like they can experiment and go into a fight and do it again and again and again without the cost of having to grind for crafting materials whenever they're fighting. This doesn't leave meals in a great place though. What happens to them? Another option that you could do is you could just split out the food entirely, get rid of the fact that it gives you health points at all. You would need to do something like the Estus Flask solution here, but here you could just have them doing the passive bonus. This would allow the meals to still feel like they have value in the crafting system because they're just giving you, say, the plus stamina or the plus focus. It's not great though. You'd still need to find a way to make the meals feel like they're their own system. And if you went that path, they would step on the other power buffs like flasks a lot. Another option is treat food more like bonuses to the flask. You still change to the Estus flask, but you make food a way to modify it. You basically make feels a bonus. Say you eat a meal, which gives your flask a bonus to it whenever you use the flask. Maybe it gives an extra amount of heal, or maybe it adds a bonus amount of stamina or focus. Maybe it even increases your strength for a short period of time. This is a way to provide players with the ability to have a base level healing, giving them the option to experiment and learn, but then still allowing meals to feel like they fit their own unique role, because what they're doing is they're modifying the flask as opposed to feeling like they need to step on or exist in the same space as the other power buffs that you're getting from vials. So which is best? Well, my personal preference would be to add the Estus flask and treat meals as a way to modify it. I like this the most as it resolves the issue with healing in combat with a very known solution, and then keeps meals in a valuable and unique role. Players still feel like meals would be valuable and a part of your kit, but you wouldn't feel the need to go and farm them in between battle. The way this could work for the player is the player would go and fight the boss without any meals, without any bonuses, learn the fight, experiment just using the standard Estus flask. And then once they felt like they had it down and they wanted to commit to really a real attempt, they would then consume the meal. And then they would have that buff for the duration of the fight until they died. This would still leave meals in an interesting place, but it wouldn't require players to grind a lot between fights. They would still feel like they can go in and experiment and learn. Really though, the next step, if I was on the team, would be to start implementing some of these. At the moment, this is all just what we call theory crafting. The proof is when you actually get it in there and get it working. I really look forward to seeing what the team figures out and seeing how they solve the problem. If you like this video, I got way more like it, including one on Thronefall, where I chat about how to make a game that's both minimalist and deep at the same time. For now though, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.